The Farmhouse Garden Animal Home is located in Uxbridge, Ontario, which is not far from Toronto. For many generations, I think it was a cattle ranch, but in 2016, the multi-generational organic farmer and cattle rancher, Mike Lanigan, had a change of heart, and he decided he no longer wanted to see the cows sent to slaughter. So he invited his employee, Edith Barabash, to help convert the cattle ranch into a sanctuary, safe haven where the animals can live safely and happily until the natural end of their lives. And I recently had the privilege and joy of watching the cows heading out happily to their summer pasture, which was really awesome. And Edith has agreed to be with us here today to tell us more about the Farmhouse Garden Animal Home. And thank you for taking that time today, Edith. I know it's busy on farms.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. And so you were working for Mike when the farm was set up. It was originally a cattle ranch. You weren't there for all those generations, obviously, but you went to work with him, and you were vegan. And I understand he had some pigs and chickens in addition to the cows. And so, I'm thinking personally that that would be kind of a difficult thing, caring for animals and then sending them off to their death. But it sounds like you played a pretty significant role in encouraging, calmly, quietly over time, encouraging Mike's natural compassion for the animals to evolve in him. And then eventually he came to this change of heart. So where do we start to understand this process? And so let's starting with you at coming to the farm. How did you become vegan? Were you vegan when you went to the farm, or did the animals inspire you to become vegan?
So I was originally vegan more for health reasons, and that started from a pretty young age. I think I was maybe like 14 or so when I first started dabbling in veganism, because my mom was a vegetarian, and it was always like instilled in me that it's better for you, it's healthier. So I wasn't at all exposed to the ethical side of it at that age. And then I started working for Mike at his farmer's market, which is near where I live. And then decided to start interning at his farm the following summer. And that's when I started really connecting with the animals there and learning about what animals are like and how sweet and wonderful they can actually be. And it's really that experience that led me towards ethical veganism. So it was pretty difficult after making that connection and becoming an ethical vegan to continue to stay there and continue working with these animals, knowing that they're going to be sent to slaughter. But essentially the reason that I started working at his farm was so I could learn to grow organic fruits and vegetables. I wanted to have that knowledge. I wanted to work with the land a little more. So I knew that's kind of what I was there for. And having been so young, and I mean, maybe this is a good thing that I wasn't able to kind of speak up with that kind of conviction just yet. I started just kind of quietly thinking to myself that, oh, like maybe this isn't the best way to do things. I started slowly sharing my ideas with Mike, just kind of gently and quietly, because I still was formulating my own opinions on the matter. And then, yeah, after a few years, he started to see that as well. And it all really did work out great. But there were a lot of difficult moments too. There were times when I had to accompany Mike to the slaughterhouse, which was incredibly difficult for me. But it's moments like that that really strengthened my resolve to help animals and help me become an ethical vegan. So yeah, I think it worked both ways. I helped him and he helped me. So yeah.
It's definitely a journey, right? The becoming vegan and just the growing awareness. And then right now, I know there's a lot going on in the US, and we're hearing a lot about what's happening on the streets, which I personally feel that the violence that humans inflict on other humans is somehow connected to the violence that we accept with regard to what happens to animals, and the violence that people ingest every day. And I did that for the first 29 years of my life too. So I get that. But so that aside, I mean, if you're welcome to comment on that. It's just sort of an instinct that I'm having. It's a very emotional time, right? And then at the same time, I was watching that last night, and I was also watching a live situation with DXE at an Iowa farm where they were basically burning the pigs alive, right? And people were chaining themselves to the fence to try to stop this from happening. And of course, that one guy had already been arrested for trying to expose what was happening when they were in another instance, apparently the pigs, because they can't sell them, and I guess if you can't make money off of them, they don't want to send them to sanctuary. I don't know. So they actually shut all the windows and stopped the circulation and just turned up the heat. And basically, these guys, just died by suffocation. So there's these horrible, horrible things going on. I think slaughterhouses are horrible places anytime. Um, what so for people who think that, oh well, it's okay because I'm having a animal from a happy farm, like it sounds like Mike's was a happy farm, right? But still they all go to the same slaughter. And what did you see at the slaughterhouse that really impacted you?
Yeah, I think maybe before I get into that, I do want to quickly comment on what's happening now in the world and the Black Lives Matter movement, and how it's so important for us as vegans to be intersectional in our activism and to recognize that all forms of oppression are so interconnected, and it can't just be about one group. It has to be about deconstructing all hierarchies and all of these forms of oppression. So I think that's really important to highlight. So thanks for doing that. And yeah, the whole idea of happy animals going to slaughter, I mean, to me, having been to these humane slaughterhouses, the exact same thing happens to an animal, whether or not they were raised on beautiful green pastures or inside of a factory farm. They end up in the same horrifying place, and it's the same horrifying death. And I think, like, we as vegans know that these are just buzzwords to make ourselves feel better about what we're doing. But in reality, there is no humane way to kill somebody. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and much more fun to enjoy them while they're alive. And I just another follow up there with totally in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, and the intersectionality. I think that's really important for us to work together alongside each other, because these struggles are, as you say, they're all connected. And I heard someone say recently, which I thought was really cool. She said, veganism isn't the solution to everything in the world, but, which I don't know, I kind of think maybe it is. But she said, veganism isn't necessarily the solution to everything in the world, but no solution is complete without it. So
I think that's really well put. I think that's a
right,
very good. Yeah,
like if we're
absolutely.
struggling for the justice for humans, we also need to think about, I think, the what's going on with the animals. So
Yeah, I
which
think as long as, sorry, as long as there's one group of individuals who thinks they have some kind of power or authority over another, to decide who lives and who dies or who suffers, that's the root of all of our problems, I think.
right. And so you were on the farm when they were breeding, because they are brought into existence for the purpose of being killed, right? Yeah.
Well, it was kind of a mix. Like, what Mike would do is keep certain animals of with preferred genetics to let them breed naturally, and sometimes it's something, and this is so, it was so odd to me at the time thinking that this was happening, but like, he'd bring in somebody with a literal catalog of like bull genetics and breed one of the cows. So yeah, no, it's weird, and yeah, that's how they were breeding them.
And then when they're born, they're given basically a date of death as well.
Yeah, because there's a kind of like a maximum amount of time that they can be there where it's efficient to raise them, because it costs so much money to raise these animals, as I know so well. But I mean, obviously, there's so much more than a dollar amount now. But after they reach past the age of 2 or so, it's just no longer efficient from a financial perspective to keep feeding them if you're not going to also benefit financially from them. So that's the date that they're given when they're born. unfortunately.
And so when people say, well, what will we do with all the animals if everybody goes vegan? What will we do with the animals? Well, that's the solution. We just
Just
don't.
don't breed them into existence. It's as
Right.
simple as that. Yeah, and obviously the world's not gonna go vegan overnight. Slowly the supply or the demand for meat is going to dwindle, and as that happens, less and less animals are going to be bred into existence. So slowly this kind of made up problem is going to fix itself, right?
Well, we gotta hope, don't we? Yeah. And you said something interesting. You said that it costs a lot of money, and you implied that there are other costs involved with bringing animals into existence. Did you mean like the climate costs? Or?
Oh, that well, of course that too. But I mean, like as a farmer, you're thinking these animals are essentially a product for you to sell, right? So you're thinking, um, this is how much it's going to cost me to raise them in terms of feed, shelter, all of that, versus how much money is going to be brought in at the end. And yeah, it's a messed up way of thinking about a living being, but that's how it's calculated as a farmer, right? But of course, there's like the climate cost and a whole like the health costs. There's a whole bunch of other things to factor in, but I don't really think farmers are thinking about that.
There hasn't been the awareness of that. I think that awareness is growing too. Okay, so let's talk about how to transition because, I think this is a really great time for farmers to think about that because things are changing. People are reaching for the other forms of milk, and lots of people are going vegan. So, you were involved in the process of transitioning this farm. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, transitioning from a cattle ranch to a sanctuary, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not an easy process. There's especially if you're in the middle of like a farming community with so many other individuals who are against what you're doing. Um, it, it is difficult. There's a lot of pressures. There's also a lot of financial pressure. I think it's really awesome to give farmers a way to transition their business rather than, for example, converting to sanctuary. I'm very thankful that we're doing it. I think it's amazing. I don't think it's a viable solution for everybody because you're so dependent on fundraising. And I mean, Mike was lucky enough to have me and another team of people around, but other farmers aren't going to have a team of vegans who are ready to, fundraise for them. But I think it would be amazing to give farmers a way to transition from raising animals to growing vegetables. And there's amazing groups that are already doing that. There is Renee King Sonnen in the United States, in Texas, I believe, Rowdy Girl Sanctuary, and they're helping farmers transition to growing crops. There's a group called Farm Transformers, I believe, who I talked to a few years back, and they're also doing great work with helping farmers transition. So the resources are becoming more readily available for farmers who are willing. It's just about getting them to open their minds and realizing that there is another way, and they can still make money. They can still be on the land and do what they're passionate about, minus, slaughtering animals.
Right. And so Farm Transformers, that's cool. And Mercy for Animals, I think, also has a transition program going on.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So this is something maybe that vegans could organize, is some kind of teamwork, connecting with farmers right now who are, there's no way to get their product to market because of the COVID in the slaughterhouses. So now, and they've got some money from the government still. So if vegans were to organize and say, look, we're going to help you, we're going to do this legwork, that, figure out how we can help you fundraise for this. So are mostly you guys are running on donations now then?
So Mike has transitioned the majority of his business. So he was growing crops before as well, but now he supplements the income that he would have made on selling the animals with growing more crops. And that side of his business is completely separate from the animal rescue, which we fund from public donations, from selling merchandise, having events like letting out the cows. Mike is he still has that livelihood. Like he's still working the land, he's still growing vegetables, and we're lucky enough to still have the animals here. So it's a real win-win, but the two are kept separate.
I see. And so what kind of are you guys growing?
Basically any vegetable that will grow in Canada is grown on this little amazing mixed farm. There's a bunch of root crops, carrots, beets, potatoes. There's kale, lettuces, all the leafy greens, and they're all sold at the village market in Thornhill. That's 9100 Bathurst Street every single Saturday. So Mike's been there for like almost 30 years, I think, selling at this farmer's market. And it's all organic, and it's all cruelty free.
And and through the winter, are there crops that you can grow through the winter?
So we store a lot of our root crops through the winter. So yeah, like a lot of the beets, potatoes, carrots, parsnips, all that kind of stuff is still going to be Mike's, but he also imports organic produce in the winter so that people who want organic, like leafy greens and stuff that won't grow in Canada, can still get it from the farmers market all year round.
Cool. Okay, and there's other places, I know restaurants like to buy or local organic produce. So I'm thinking of all these other farmers. I think the alternative meat industry or alternative milk industry, oat milk is huge in Canada right now. Like, I think there's a lot of potential
So good.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as a farmer who's just kind of struggling to make ends meet, the last thing on your mind is, or the last thing you want on your mind is, how am I going to transition my entire business, all I know how to do, into something else? So I do think it is up to us also to step up and help them. Otherwise, the change isn't going to happen, or it is, but very rarely, just because it's already difficult enough to be a farmer in Canada. So yeah.
And I was listening to Mike's story when you guys were interviewed on Animal Voices from Vancouver Co-op Radio in 2016, and I'll post the link to that because that was really interesting too. And it sounded like, he had this love of the animals, and I think all farmers have that, and somehow they have to kind of harden themselves. They have to create a screen between themselves and the farm and the animals in order to send them to slaughter. But Mike somehow pulled that veil away. Do you think that's true of other farmers? Do you think deep down they might rather be not doing that?
It's hard to say. I'm the kind of person that always tries to see the best in other people. I would like to say yes. Because I'm at the farmers market, I've talked to so many farmers who seem like such amazing, compassionate people. And it's beyond me why they have that kind of divide or that switch in mind, like Mike says, that they could just turn off. So I would like to think that if they realized it, if they knew that there was another way, that they would take it. But it's hard for me as somebody who was born in the suburbs. Like, I wasn't born into a farming family. I don't know what it's like to have that so deeply ingrained in me. So for me, perhaps it was easier to make that switch. It seems like a no-brainer for me. Um, but I don't know what it's like as a farmer who just was raised believing this so deeply.
Right. So approaching them, we need to respect that there's a long tradition there. And there's a lot of memories. I know I have a friend from Saskatchewan, or a workmate from Saskatchewan, who grew up on a farm and like a big farm, and all the families owned farms, and they would all get together every year for the annual chicken slaughter. And this was a huge event, and he got to see all his cousins, and it's in his mind, it's this great family get together. Yeah, they did this horrible thing, right? But so when we approach farmers as vegans, we just, I think, need to understand that this goes deep. But if we can gently, as you did, maybe hand a flyer or something and say, hey, if you think about this, give me a call, or so, do you think they'd be open to something like that?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think there's ever any one right approach to
Right.
activism. Everybody's going to react to things differently. And the way that I do activism happened to resonate with Mike. And that was a very lucky coincidence, I think.
Mm.
So I think a lot of people are doing amazing work. And whether it's a leaflet or whether it's being, like being stronger and louder with your activism, we don't know what's going to work, but I do think it's important to be mindful of the fact that people are raised in different ways, and the things that are a no-brainer to me are not going to be necessarily be the same for other people. So
Right.
just something to be mindful of.
Right, and you're right. Different people react in different ways. Like some people want a strong, and other people back away from that. So it's really a tricky game. And I would love for the government to get involved and offers a program for just transition, right, to help farmers. But until then, I think that's something that we could do. So just like farmers have different personalities, the animals have different personalities, right? And so
100%,
tell
yeah.
us some of the creatures on your farm there.
We've got some characters on the farm. There's some cows that are so sweet and so gentle. I don't know if you have read about Hope. That was the calf that Mike was working with when he first kind of made that switch and realized that he doesn't want to send her to slaughter. And she's this like tiny little thing. She's still so small because she was born prematurely, and she's never going to be as big and strong as the other cows. But she's just the sweetest little girl. We have a calf named Gord who's really sweet, and then on the other hand we have a cow named Coco who is like super strong-willed and a little more aggressive. We have some really silly cows. We have one named Einstein who's just like so silly and will, as soon as she sees people, she just comes up and starts like licking you and asking for food. And of course, we have our famous diva Buckwheat the donkey, who's doing Zoom calls with
Right.
people now.
Yeah, tell us about that. What's going on with that?
It's awesome. It's a really great way, I think, to not only have a lot of fun with Buckwheat, which is we chose her to do this because she loves social interaction. She loves when the volunteers are with her and petting her and feeding her. And we knew that she would. I mean, obviously, she's free to walk away during the meeting if she wants, but she always just wants to hang around, and she's really curious. Um, and it's also a really great way to educate other people. We are in this unique position where we're now talking to hundreds of people every week who would otherwise never be exposed to an animal rights message, and we're telling them about our story and about how all of our cows were saved from slaughter. And I mean, yeah, we had calls with people who, well, companies that we never thought would be interested in an animal rescue. And I think we were able to like plant some compassionate seeds in their minds. It was
That's
really cool. It's a great
wonderful.
experience.
So like just a regular office-y type meeting might
Yeah.
say, hey, just for fun, let's invite this donkey into our Zoom. That's how that goes?
That's literally how well, some of them are just families getting together. We had like a girls' night Zoom. It was super cute. But the majority of them are like these serious corporate meetings, and then they'll take like a 10-minute break to just hang out with Buckwheat and hear about our story, and then they'll go right back into their serious corporate meeting.
Oh my God.
Um, and we were really surprised at like the companies that reached out to us were like, you're interested in a meeting with an animal rescue? It was very cool.
Okay, so whose idea was this? This is brilliant.
It was actually one of our board members, Tim Fors, and we were kind of brainstorming how to bring like these virtual experiences to people who still want to interact with the animals at the sanctuary. So at first and we're still doing this. We're doing like live events, like Facebook live events virtually. But yeah, Tim had this awesome idea of we call it like being a meeting crasher. And Buckwheat was like the perfect candidate because we knew that she would absolutely love it. Yeah.
That is so great. And so Buckwheat, and then there's a horse as well. And they've been on the farm a long time, I guess. Eh?
Yeah, they've been on the farm since before the transition to the sanctuary. A lot of the animals were there from before. Um, there are some new animals. We have some really sweet little hens that we just rescued. We just rescued a rooster quite he's quite the character. He's a bit of an aggressive rooster, and we're trying to figure out a way to like calm him down a little bit. But I mean, the personalities on the farm are so varied. There's just never a dull moment. and you have to know how to interact with each individual animal, right? Like, which one likes ear rubs, which one likes parsnips versus carrots. Like, everyone has their own likes and dislikes, and things that make them frustrated. So yeah, it's really interesting. You really have to know them.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, anybody who's grown up with dogs or cats knows that they all are different. You
Yeah.
know, it's quite remarkable. When I was young, I lived in a place where I got to go to a riding stable. I loved horses. I got to volunteer there and brush the horses and stuff. And there was a rooster who was quite cantankerous. And they had a goat. They had a goat, and the rooster and the goat became really good buddies,
Oh,
and
okay.
and that helped calm the rooster down. So I don't know if
I
the goat
love
is the
that. That's
solution.
a good
Yeah.
idea. I guess yeah, we'll see if he interacts well with any of the other animals. We're a little scared to introduce him to any of the other animals just in case. Like, we don't want anyone getting hurt, so we have to do it very slowly and carefully.
Right.
Um, but yeah, like, the rooster didn't get along. We have two ducks. They're a couple, and they're really sweet. They're always together. They're just
Aw.
the cutest little pair. But the male duck, Lucky, did not get along with the rooster, so we had to quickly separate them. And since then, we're very, very careful about who he interacts with until we know that he's a little more tamed.
Right.
Uh, yeah, but it's, part of sanctuary life is making sure that every animal's needs are met and that they're safe, sometimes from each other too, right? So,
Yeah. Well, and a rooster has a big job. I mean, that's birds are very they're preyed on from all angles. It must be a really strong instinct for a rooster to have to protect all these ladies, right?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
and there's not a lot of roosters because of the way that eggs are produced. Well, how do you feel about backyard chickens?
I I think we see firsthand how problematic they are because the majority of the hens that we've rescued are from backyard farms. Many times, they're this kind of novelty of like, oh, look at these cute little chickens, like, we'll run for a bit, and then once they start producing less eggs, or once they've been replaced with younger hens, a lot of people who raise them will just give them off to a farmer who will then slaughter them, right? So, um, we see firsthand like how problematic that is, and how at the end of the day these animals still are viewed as commodities, at least in the majority of cases. I obviously can't speak to all of them, but there's also the fact that a lot of backyard hens are still bred into existence rather than being rescued. So again, there's so many. I think chickens, especially, there are so many of them that need a good home, and to breed more is very irresponsible. So there's, I guess, like, there's many layers to this, and there's many reasons why I think it's not the most ethical thing. Um, and yeah, I think whenever people want to get eggs that are more like humane or ethical, first of all, I recognize that that comes from a place where they want to be more compassionate to animals. And on one hand, that's a good thing. But I also always urge them to ask deeper questions and ask, once like, always ask when you're getting eggs, like, where are these hens going to go after they stop laying or stop being as productive? Or where do the hens come from? Are they rescues or are they bred into existence? So yeah, always ask questions, and realize that, like, humane washing is a thing, and these buzzwords of like backyard free range are essentially just meant to make us feel better about things that we're doing.
Mm. Yeah, and the thing with chickens too is as the hens are bred into existence, of course they can't just select hens being bred into existence. So there's a lot of roosters that are born and nobody wants them, and they get like ground up alive from what I've understand.
Yeah, no, it's a horrifying industry from all angles.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we have to keep educating people, encourage them to ask questions and really see where their food comes from.
Right, yeah. I have a friend down the road who rescued some hens. They were no longer egg laying, and she didn't want them for that purpose. She just wanted to rescue some hens. And so that was really cool. They were so much fun. She had, but they cleared out her backyard, man. It's amazing how they can just clear a whole area, right? If you want your
That's so,
backyard cleared out,
yeah, they'll do.
right, rescue some old hens, and she just let them live until they died, and
Oh,
that was really nice. Yeah, she got a
yeah,
few eggs out of it along the way, and that was fine,
yeah,
but that wasn't her purpose, so I really respect that.
yeah.
So is that the idea there then, that the cattle will kind of die a natural death, and then will Mike and the farm continue to become a sanctuary? It'll stay as a sanctuary?
Um, it's hard to say at the moment whether we'll take more large animals in the near future because we're so limited in terms of space and funds. Um, but the hope is definitely that in the future we'll be able to rescue more animals. Right now we're focusing on only smaller animals, again because of the space and the monetary constraints. But of course, like all the animals at the sanctuary are going to live long, happy lives there. We know that.
Right, yeah. And so is that kind of you're mostly involved with the animals then rather than the veggies, or are you doing a little of both?
I'm doing a mix of both. So I still sell Mike's vegetables at the farmers market on the weekends as like a little part-time job while I'm in school. Um, and I'm also, of course, like much more involved in the sanctuary work, doing a lot of the administrative tasks and also caring for the animals. But we have a lot of amazing volunteers, obviously, that do a lot of the heavy lifting.
Okay, I think a lot of sanctuaries are like that, where people come and clean out the barns and do all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we have volunteers coming out very regularly. We couldn't do this without them. They're amazing. We have a great team.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I don't have a vehicle, or I would probably do that too, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's hard to access without a vehicle.
yeah, we have a couple of sanctuaries on Vancouver Island here, and I know people regularly go. And, of course, in the winter, you need people committed. I've heard that sometimes it's difficult for sanctuaries because people will come and they think it's going to be fun, and then they don't realize how much hard work it is. And so you want people who are serious about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we're lucky to have quite a few of those really dedicated ones, but unfortunately, yeah, it does happen where people get excited in the summer to like come a couple times a month and enjoy the time with the animals, but then aren't necessarily willing to be there when it's like negative 20 degrees in the winter and you're freezing your butt off and you have to take care of the animals. But the animals still need us, rain or shine, like cold or hot, they need us to be there. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're at school. What are you studying?
I'm in law school now.
Oh,
Um, yeah, going into my final year.
wow. And
Yeah.
are you going to practice animal rights law?
Yeah, I hope to incorporate, I really love animal rights law and environmental law, hopefully to incorporate those together somehow. Yeah, still figuring it out.
Good for
But
you.
yeah, no, that's what I definitely hope to do.
That's awesome. And it's wonderful that you hopefully will be able to maintain some connection with the farm, because you've been there how long now?
Oh my gosh. Like maybe 7, 8 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it was my first part-time job ever was coming to Mike with my resume, like until he hired me. Yeah,
What a
no,
great, what a great background to bring to animal rights law as well, because you've lived with the animals and you understand what they might want to say if they had an opportunity.
yeah, I think I'm really lucky to be in this unique position, having interacted with animals so much, and also just having. I feel like Mike and I have been able to kind of bridge the farming community and the animal rights community, and our sanctuary is almost kind of like a space for everybody to come and share ideas and be respectful. Um, and yeah, it's a very very privileged position that we're in to be able to see both sides of so many stories.
Yeah, it's really important to build those bridges. Absolutely. And you mentioned that you're doing administrative work. So when we talk about, finances, which, whether we like it or not, it does drive a lot of our decision making. So, currently through COVID, the federal government is doing a pretty good job, I think, of trying to take care of people so that we end up not having riots in the streets, which, I appreciate is primarily the situation with George Floyd, but is also, I think, a result of 3 months of people being told you can't go to work, but we're not going to do anything to help you either, basically. Whereas in Canada, we've been really lucky, I think, to have a fair amount of support. And I also just want to mention, I think personally that's because we have a minority government. A lot of people don't like to vote minority governments, but because the Liberals have to listen to the NDP and the Green Party and the Bloc, we're seeing what we're seeing. I think that's the consequence of that. So what kind of subsidies are you guys getting, if I could ask? And do you think, do you think this is an opportunity? Like, could a farmer, if they had some assistance, could they take that money and transition at this time?
Yeah, unfortunately, like we're not receiving any assistance for the sanctuary work that we're doing at the moment, and that is probably primarily because we're a registered nonprofit but not a registered charity at the moment. So we're not eligible for a lot of assistance
Oh.
that charities might be eligible for.
Hmm.
I think we are eligible for various loans,
Hmm.
but in terms of other financial assistance, we aren't getting that. But we do have to just keep going and continue our fundraising and be creative with the way that we're doing it. But I definitely think for small businesses right now, there is a lot of support in terms of like hiring people and getting loans. And maybe it is a good time for farmers to start thinking about other ways of sourcing their revenue that isn't based on raising animals and slaughtering them.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to speak to that at the
Right.
moment.
Well, that's interesting what you said, though, because if you were set up as a business and you had a business license and you were functioning on a for-profit basis,
Hmm.
you would be eligible for some funding, it sounds like. But and if you were a charity, a registered charity, you would be eligible for some funding. But you're sort of in that gray area in the middle where you're not not for profit, but without that additional charitable status. So there's
Hmm.
no funding. That's interesting. I did not know
No, there's no, not that I'm aware of at least, and
that.
I've looked quite a bit, but
So are you guys planning on applying for charitable status?
at the moment, we've made a bit of a conscious decision to remain only a nonprofit because once you become a registered charity, there's a lot of added work every year. There's um, a lot more administrative work that you have to go through, and we aren't necessarily in a financial position or in a position in terms of the number of volunteers and people we have doing administrative work to do that kind of stuff. Right now, it is primarily me and our other board member, Tim, who are doing all the administrative tasks. And to have that added layer would just, we wouldn't even know where to start. And it also requires quite a bit of an upfront cost to become a registered charity. And we aren't able to delve into that at the moment. But I really do hope that it is in our future eventually. But right now, we're just trying to kind of stay afloat where we are.
Right, right. Well, that's interesting too, because it's a bit of a catch-22 then, because once you're a charity, people will donate to charities more readily because they get the tax break. Whereas you don't get a tax break if you give money to a nonprofit. It's just a gift, basically. And yet they make you do all this extra work. Oh, government, I don't understand. We need to streamline some of this stuff, right? And definitely there's funding for farmers, I think, specifically because they're set up as businesses then,
Um, I
I
think it
guess.
depends on the kind of farmer. Like, I don't think Mike is getting very much assistance for the work that he's doing as a farmer either. Um, I think there was some money that he could have gotten in order to hire some students, for example, but all of that funding is already gone and has been given to other businesses. So there's only so much to go around too. Yeah,
All right.
it's a bit complicated.
Okay, so Buckwheat the donkey, I think that's a great way to get some extra funding. And then I really enjoyed the online opportunity. We got to buy a basket of food and watch you guys feed the vegetables. Where you feed like beets and, I mean, I've never seen cows eat beets before like that.
Cows will eat almost anything. A mix of, we were very lucky to get a donation from Mike and Mike's Organics. They're a big organic produce company. And they gave us the most beautiful boxes of apples and carrots and kale. So the cows were like having the time of their lives. Yeah, no, they really enjoyed it, and it's really thanks to people like you who bought these boxes and who donated to us and helped us out that we're able to kind of get through this bit of a rough patch. And of course, people who order a session with Buckwheat, that helps a lot. So we're trying to get a little more creative with the way that we're fundraising. And so far it's been working. Like we're doing pretty well, all things considered. And yes, thanks to our supporters at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of support for fundraising for sanctuaries goes on a lot around here too. You know, there used to be regular dinners and events and silent auctions, and of course that's all kind of faded away. I think some of the sanctuaries now are doing virtual tours. Have you thought about doing that?
Yeah. Right now we're very lucky to have been completely inundated with calls for buckwheat. So the vast majority of our time right now is scheduling and doing these calls, which is like a really good situation to be in, as time consuming and difficult as it is. But we do hope to also incorporate live tours and also continue doing these virtual visiting days that we've done. So we've had the one where we let the cows out, and then we had one before that where we basically gave a tour of the sanctuary and also hung out with the animals, and that was really successful too. I think a big part of what we do is, well, to me, it's really important to keep these accessible. So having the tours, or at least our monthly tours, be free for people to just tune in and watch and listen to is really important for me personally, because a big part of what we do is education. And I don't necessarily want there to be a financial barrier for anybody who wants to learn about what we do. So we try to do a mix of both. We have these free tours, and of course, we love it when people are able to financially support us, because that helps us so much even during these tours. But yeah, our meetings with Buckwheat have really been carrying the sanctuary these past few months.
I just love that. And so Buckwheat does not get tired of this. She just loves being at the screen.
I mean, she's not really doing anything. She's doing the exact same thing that she would normally on an average day, just hanging out with Melody, her horse friend who's in the paddock. She's eating, she's kind of like walking or running around her paddock. Nothing has changed for her in terms of her daily routine. It's just that we're there videotaping it and feeding her and giving her extra love and pets. And
Oh, great. Yeah,
yeah, she's loving it.
that's awesome. Okay, so where can people go if they want to support the work that you're doing, Edith?
So our website is www.farmhousegardenanimalhome.com. And they can donate there. They can become a monthly sponsor for any of our animals. And that's hugely important for us, because it really gives us that peace of mind of knowing that we'll have regular income coming in the future. And then we can plan for like building more infrastructure, taking in more animals. So that's extremely helpful. And yeah, like following us on social media. So it's Farmhouse Garden Animal Home on Instagram and on Facebook. Sharing our posts, liking our pages, supporting us in any little way that they can. On our website, we also have volunteer forms that people can fill out if they want to, or if they're close enough to volunteer physically. But even for people who are far away or in Vancouver, we always need help with online or administrative tasks, and that can be done remotely. So there's plenty of ways to help us, both in person or remotely. Um, and yeah, we're so thankful for every little thing that people do to help us.
Hmm. I just thought of another thing that they do on the island here is the sanctuaries will have an arrangement with the local feed shops. So a person can go, if they happen to be in the feed shop, they can say, oh, and here's an extra $20 or whatever towards the next purchase. Yeah, that's another
Yeah. Oh,
thing.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely consider that. That's great.
Great. Yeah, because I know it's an ongoing thing, and I think we have a responsibility. We brought these creatures into the world. We have a responsibility to look after them, right?
Yeah, that's how
Uh,
I see it. Mm.
So, do you want? I know you need to get back to work because it's busy on the farm.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to share before we go?
No, just I want to thank you for having me on, and to everybody listening. You know, supporting your local sanctuaries is so important. Not many people realize the amount of work and blood and sweat and tears that go into helping these animals. It's really emotionally taxing, and physically and financially. So every little bit counts, and we're so thankful for all of our supporters out there.
I thought of one more thing before we go. Sorry, is that I know when the sanctuary set up here, they suddenly were inundated with calls of people with various creatures. Does that happen to you too? Yeah.
Yeah, we get actually we it's good that you brought this up, because we're connected to a network called well, an Ontario network called the Association of Farm Sanctuaries Ontario. Our board member Tim actually set this up, and it's a great way for like whenever we get an email or a call asking to rehome an animal that we can't take in, we have this network, and we're able to post on a Facebook group, um, and other sanctuaries can see how they can help. And it's also a great network if you just have like questions about caring for animals, um, and for the public to kind of check in on us and see how we're doing. Um, so yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. We do get a lot of calls, but we have quite a few sanctuaries here that are always willing to help.
Good. Okay. It's nice to have that collaborative support for sure. Thank you so much, Edith. It was really a pleasure to talk with you today.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me here.